My name is Laura Palmer. I was 36 years old when the man I thought I would marry looked me dead in the eyes and told me I should pay him for the privilege of loving him. At first, I actually thought he was joking. We were sitting at my kitchen table, the one I built myself from reclaimed oak after watching 6 straight hours of woodworking tutorials during a winter storm 3 years earlier. The late afternoon light was cutting through the blinds in thin gold stripes, hitting the coffee mug in his hands. He looked calm. Too calm. "I'm serious," Nolan said. "You should pay me rent." I laughed once. Rent? To live in my own house? Hear me out. That phrase, hear me out. Every disaster in my adult life had started with those 3 words. The house was mine, completely mine. I bought it 9 years earlier at a foreclosure auction for $127,000 cash. Every dollar came from years of diesel mechanic work. First at a dealership, where supervisors treated me like I was invisible because I was a woman, then later from crawling under fleet trucks in freezing parking lots after I started my own mobile repair business. Nobody helped me. Nobody inherited me a future. I skipped vacations, ate cheap dinners, worked 12-hour days until my hands cracked open every winter. While other people spent money decorating apartments they didn't own, I saved every extra dollar, so one day nobody could ever threaten my housing again. That mattered to me more than Nolan ever understood. When I bought the place, it was a disaster. Cracked foundation, bad roof, ancient wiring. Half the kitchen cabinets literally fell off the wall the first week I moved in. I rebuilt everything slowly, with my own hands. Nights, weekends, bruised knuckles. YouTube tutorials paused every 30 seconds. By the time Nolan moved in 14 months ago, the house had nearly doubled in value. At first, living together felt easy. He worked as a billing specialist at a medical office, made decent money, not amazing, but enough to support himself comfortably. I told him from day one he didn't need to pay rent because the house was already paid off. I only asked him to split groceries and utilities, around $400 to $500 a month total. His old apartment had cost over $1,000 monthly. Living with me saved him almost $700 every single month. I never held that over his head. At least, not in the beginning. Because in the beginning, Nolan acted grateful. He'd bring me cold drinks while I worked outside, sit on the back steps, listening to me ramble about engine problems like he genuinely cared. Sometimes, he'd wrap his arms around my waist while I cooked and say things like, "You make everywhere feel safe." I believed him. That was the worst part. Somewhere around month 8, something shifted. The comments started small. "Why don't we just hire contractors? You can afford better countertops. Why are you always so obsessed with saving money?" The way he said saving money made it sound like some embarrassing medical condition. Then came the shopping bags.
Nordstrom, Sephora, Anthropology.
Again and again. I didn't care what he bought with his own money until he started forgetting his half of the utility payments. 1 month short, 1 month late, 1 month completely unpaid. By month 12, he owed me about $600. I kept spreadsheets for everything because running a repair business without tracking numbers is how people go broke. When I calmly brought up the missing utility money, Nolan leaned back in his chair and stared at me like I was insulting him. "You make over $100,000 a year, and you're tracking $600? You live here for free," I said quietly. "I only asked you to split bills." "That's exactly what I mean," he snapped. "Everything with you becomes transactional." I should have recognized the projection right there. Because a few months later, he sat me down at my own kitchen table and tried to charge me for existing. "I contribute emotionally," he said that afternoon. "I cook, I clean, I make this house feel like a home." I deal with your hours, your stress, your moods.
I'm
That has
confused.
value.
I don't know.
I remember staring at him, trying to understand how we had somehow ended up in completely different realities. How much? I finally asked. 2,000 a month.
Silence.
Not shocked silence. The kind of silence where your brain genuinely refuses to process what it just heard. You want me, I said slowly, to pay you $2,000 every month to live inside the house I bought before I even met you? You're twisting it. No, I said. I'm repeating it. He crossed his arms. You know what your problem is? You think because you own property, you hold all the power. I laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. You're asking me to pay you rent in my own house. You're completely ignoring emotional labor. And you're completely ignoring reality. His jaw tightened. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. You have all this money and security, while I have nothing in my name. Do you know how humiliating that feels as a man? There it was. Not partnership.
Resentment.
I suddenly understood every weird comment, every passive-aggressive remark about money, every guilt trip whenever I refused expensive renovations. He didn't want equality. He wanted ownership. That night, he slept in the guest room. I sat alone at my kitchen table with a bourbon in my hand and this horrible feeling growing heavier in my chest. Because once somebody shows you they see your love as leverage, you can't unsee it. The next morning, Nolan acted like nothing happened. Made coffee, asked if I wanted breakfast. I said yes because part of me still hoped this could be fixed. But while he was at work later that afternoon, I called a real estate attorney. The consultation cost $275. Worth every penny. The lawyer listened quietly while I explained everything. Then he said something that made the entire situation suddenly feel terrifyingly real. He has no ownership claim, the attorney said, but he has established legal residency. You cannot simply lock him out. You'll need to provide formal 30-day notice. 30-day notice. Hearing those words out loud felt like hearing the relationship flatline. Still, I waited 4 more days before serving it. Not because I doubted myself, because I wanted to give Nolan one final chance to become the man I originally fell in love with. Instead, he changed the Wi-Fi password in my own house. I came home exhausted that evening after spending 10 hours replacing a transmission on a delivery truck in 30-degree weather. My shoulders hurt. My hands smelled like oil and metal. All I wanted was a shower, leftovers, and silence. Instead, my phone wouldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. At first, I thought the router had gone down. Then I saw Nolan sitting on the couch watching Netflix. "What's the new password?" I asked. He didn't even look embarrassed. I changed it. I stood there for a second, still wearing my work jacket. "Why?" He shrugged. "If you want the password, maybe we should continue our conversation about compensation."
Compensation.
Like loving him had become a subscription service. I stared at him and suddenly saw every moment differently. The shopping bags, the utility excuses, the comments about my income, the resentment every time I bought new tools for the business but hesitated over cosmetic upgrades he wanted. None of this had started with the rent demand. That demand was just the first time he stopped hiding it. I walked past him without another word, unplugged the router, factory reset it, created a new network, and changed every password connected to the account. "You can't do that," he snapped, finally standing up. "It's my router, my account, my house." "You're unbelievable." "No," I said quietly. "I'm awake." That night, I printed the 30-day notice. The paper felt strangely heavy in my hands. The next morning, I placed it beside his coffee mug before he came downstairs. When he saw it, his entire face drained of color. "You're evicting me? I'm giving you legal notice to vacate the property within 30 days. You're seriously ending a relationship over one conversation?" I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said. "I'm ending it because of what the conversation revealed." His eyes hardened immediately. "There it is," he said coldly. "The real Laura. The woman who thinks money makes her superior." I never thought that. "You act like everything here belongs to you." "It does belong to me." The second the words left my mouth, I saw hatred flash across his face. Not sadness. Not heartbreak. Hatred. He grabbed the coffee mug and slammed it into the sink. Ceramic exploded everywhere. Dark coffee splashed across the cabinets I had spent weeks refinishing by hand. Then he stormed out. I stood there in silence, staring at broken pieces of a mug I'd bought at a Snap-on Tool Expo 4 years earlier. Such a stupid thing to notice during the collapse of a relationship. But heartbreak makes your brain focus on weird details. I cleaned up the mess myself before leaving for work. By lunchtime, I had mailed a certified copy of the notice just to protect myself legally. That evening, Nolan came home with backup. His mother. Diane Mercer walked into my house like she was entering hostile territory. Retired school administrator, perfect posture, sharp haircut. The kind of woman who weaponized disappointment better than most people weaponized anger. "You're throwing my son out?" she demanded before even sitting down. "I'm giving him 30 days legal notice." "He sacrificed his apartment to move in with you." I almost laughed. "He saved nearly $10,000 living here rent-free." Her mouth tightened. "He contributed emotionally. So did my Labrador Retriever when I was 12. I still didn't owe him $2,000 a month." Nolan glared at me. "See? This sarcasm. This is why nobody can get close to you." That one landed harder than I expected, because part of me feared it might be true. Diane stepped closer. "A real woman takes care of her man, Laura. She doesn't keep score. A real partner doesn't demand rent to tolerate somebody. You embarrassed him." "No," I said. Reality embarrassed him. The room went dead quiet after that. Then Diane lowered her voice. "You're going to regret this. Men don't forget humiliation." Neither do women, I thought. But I didn't say it aloud. Over the next week, the situation turned ugly fast. Nolan stopped paying utilities completely. Fine. Then he started taking pictures of everything inside the house. Every room, every upgrade, every piece of furniture. "What are you doing?" I asked one night. "Documenting my contributions." I actually blinked. "You didn't contribute to the renovations. I helped make design decisions. You picked throw pillows at Target. Design has value." I walked away, because arguing with delusion is like arguing with smoke. Then came the accusation that nearly made me lose my temper. He called my mother, cried to her on the phone for 20 minutes, telling her I was financially abusive, that I used the house as leverage and controlled him with money. My mother called me immediately afterward. She sounded stunned. "Laura, did he really ask you to pay him rent?" "Yes." "In your own house?" "Yes." Silence. Then my mother exhaled slowly and said, "Serve the notice and change the locks the second he leaves." I loved her for that. Week 2. Nolan found a lawyer, or at least someone willing to write threatening letters for cheap. The letter claimed he had contributed substantial domestic and emotional labor that increased the value of the property. It demanded either $15,000 in compensation or continued housing access for 12 months. I actually laughed when I read it. $15,000 for 14 months of free living and decorative throw pillows. My attorney laughed too, though more professionally. "This has no legal merit," he said. "He's not on the deed, there's no marriage, no co-ownership, no contract. They're hoping you panic and settle." I didn't panic, but something inside me did finally die. Because even then, even after the manipulation, the entitlement, the threats, a tiny piece of me still wanted Nolan to suddenly realize what he was doing and stop. Instead, he escalated again. He contacted my business partner, Trevor, asking him to talk sense into me. Trevor later called and said, "Laura, if you're throwing him out, I assume there's a damn good reason." There is. That's all I needed to hear. Nolan also contacted two of my friends. One refused to get involved. The other texted me afterward, "Your ex sounds insane."
Example.
Seeing that word attached to him felt strange. Like the relationship had died before my heart finished catching up. Then came the police. Tuesday evening, I was in the garage changing oil when two officers knocked on the open side door. Nolan stood behind them, crying. For one terrifying second, I thought he had accused me of hitting him. Instead, he told them he felt emotionally unsafe and was being forced out unfairly. I calmly showed the officers the eviction notice, the certified mail receipt, the deed, and my attorney's paperwork. One officer looked through everything and nodded. "This appears legally valid." The other asked if there had been threats or violence. "No," I said. Nolan quietly said no too. The officers left 5 minutes later. Nolan stood in the driveway, crying after they pulled away. I watched him for a moment. Then I went back to changing oil. Not because I was heartless, because I had already cried enough in private. Moving day arrived 4 weeks later. Nolan found a one-bedroom apartment across town. Funny how quickly he returned to paying rent once it wasn't my house anymore. His mother came with a rented U-Haul trailer. They packed for hours, while I stayed in the garage, organizing tools and pretending the sound of boxes sliding across hardwood floors didn't hurt. At one point, Diane marched into the garage holding one of my dining chairs. "Nolan helped choose the wood for these," she said. "He should take them." I built those chairs with my own hands. He contributed creatively. Picking oak samples isn't woodworking. The chair stayed. Around 4 in the afternoon, Nolan finally walked into the garage alone. His eyes looked swollen from crying. "So this is really it?" he asked softly. "Yeah."
Fascinating biome.
He stood there a moment, like he expected me to stop him from leaving. Part of me almost did. Then I remembered the kitchen table, the rent demand, the Wi-Fi password, the lawyer letter asking for $15,000 because he believed existing near my success entitled him to ownership of it. "I could have made you happy," he whispered. I looked at him carefully. "No," I said. "You wanted access to what made me stable." That hit him harder than yelling would have. He turned away without another word. At 4:23 p.m., the U-Haul pulled out of my driveway. The silence afterward felt enormous. I walked room to room through the house. The throw pillows were gone. Good. The bathroom shelves were empty. The guest room looked hollow and temporary, like someone had checked out of a hotel after overstaying. I sat at my kitchen table with a bourbon and stared at the grain in the wood beneath my fingertips. 3 weeks later, the legal threats disappeared completely. No lawsuit, no court filing, nothing. Nolan did send me a Venmo request for $4,200 labeled moving costs plus emotional damages. I declined it, then blocked him. He also kept the engagement ring until my attorney reminded him engagement rings were conditional gifts under state law. The ring arrived in the mail 9 days later, wrapped in paper towels inside a padded envelope. No note. That somehow hurt more than if he'd insulted me. I changed the locks the same night. My mother called a few days later and asked gently, "You okay?" I looked around my quiet house. The house I bought. The house I rebuilt. The house nobody would ever charge me rent to live inside again. Yeah, I told her honestly. I think I finally am.